welcome to another episode of Not D&D. I'm your host, Jessica, and Not D&D is brought to you by EN Live, part of EN World, which is the leading tabletop news and review site. But I am not alone this week. I have a wonderful guest here with me, Nils. Nils, would you like to introduce yourself to the chat?
Yes. My name is, as you said, Nils Hintze, and I'm an RPG writer, mostly writing for the Free League. But I'm also a psychologist in my as my day job.
Oh,
so
wow.
I kind of write RPGs late nights and early mornings.
Okay.
So I work for the Red Cross as a psychologist with trauma victims mainly. So it's kind of far from the RPG fantasy world. So it's a good mix of two different things. But I of course play a lot of RPGs in my free time. Yeah.
Great. Well, I feel a little bit intimidated now. You do psychology now. I feel quite judged from what I do. But there we go. But today, this week, we are going to be talking about if I can put it on the screen, we're talking about Vaesen, which is kind of a Nordic horror RPG by Free League. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. So if you have any questions about that, pop them in the chat and we will answer your questions for you during the show. So feel free to put them there. But before we get into kind of the main topic, we've just started. We'll let a few more people kind of arrive and get here. So Nils, how did you start with RPGs? What was the first RPG you remember playing?
I started playing with my family. My mother was my first game master, and I started playing with my older brother. So we started to play a Swedish game that is very much like RuneQuest. It's called
cool.
like Dragons and Demons, but in Swedish. So it was kind of a rip-off of Dungeons and Dragons with another rule system. So I played that a lot my first years. So
cool. How old were you when you first started playing? When you were sounds like you were quite young. If it was at home,
I couldn't really read. I think I was 5 or 6, so it was mostly my older brother who kind of arranged it, and I played with his friends.
Yeah. So. Oh, that's very cool. I think that's the youngest we've ever had on this show, so I think you're winning so far. We've not had so you're the earliest kind of to the game there. That's really interesting about you saying it was like a Swedish version of that. Is that because they didn't have Dungeons and Dragons out in Swedish? Was there not a Swedish translation?
I think
or was it just...
the Swedish there was a Swedish translation, but it came too late. There was like a Swedish company that got really big. Role-playing games were so huge in the 80s in Sweden. So everyone had one. It was like you could go home to the cool kids, and even they had like a copy of the RPGs in their bookshelf. So they kind of just took over the whole market before Dungeons and Dragons could enter. There were quite a few people who played Dungeons and Dragons in Sweden. But nowadays it's like the biggest game by far in Sweden.
I mean, it is everywhere, but that's why we have this show here, Not Dungeons and Dragons, so we can talk about other systems, so people can learn about all the other great games that they can play, as well as Dungeons and Dragons. So talking about kind of your background with RPGs, you've been playing for a very young age, and now you work kind of part-time alongside your day job. How did that journey happen? How did you end up being an RPG writer?
Well, I had this big dream of becoming an author, a writer, to write the books and plays, and I tried to do that a lot with just crappy results, and so I kind of gave up on that. I will have to be a psychologist.
Of course, the natural fallback career for any writer is to become a psychologist.
My parents are psychologists. It was my kind of, that seems like an okay job.
Okay.
But it became great. But then I just started to write for a really small Swedish game. I just wrote like some scenarios for PDFs, and that person who wrote that game, Christian Mestam, who's now writing White Hack, the OSR game, he really helped me kind of start writing for role-playing games, and just helped me started doing that, and he kind of helped me get my first published things as well with the Free League, and then it just rolled on from there, kind of.
Excellent. So I guess if you just worked the Free League a few times, they like your work and they just keep you around, I guess. It's great.
Yeah.
So when did you first start working on Vaesen, this book here that we're going to be talking about?
Yeah, it's quite a while ago. It's hard with the times, but I mean it's years ago. It's a couple of years before Corona. That is the pre and post time.
Yeah, that's how we mark our lives now, like before and after
Yeah.
the plague. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So it's just several years ago, and Thomas at the Free League had heard me speak about that. I liked a Swedish role-playing game called Chock that we played when we were kids. That is kind of a cozy horror game. So it was like, I think you would fit well with this. So they kind of told me the pitch, and I think from the start I was just supposed to write like a campaign and some stuff for it, but then it ended up that I wrote most of it. So,
wow,
and I really like Johan Egerkrans, also the artists that it's based on, his book.
Yeah, could you talk about that a little bit? Because there's his book, and the RPG is based on his work. So could you talk us through what that is? What was the kind of inspiration source for this RPG?
Well, Johan Egerkrans, he's like an artist, an illustrator who has done a lot of things for role-playing games, but he has also done these kind of thematical books, like this Vaesen book in Sweden, which is really popular, and he has done several after that, like dragons and other horror books and so forth. So I think the Free League and him had a discussion about making an RPG out of his book. And when I was introduced into it, I didn't know this from the start. They were just, we're going to do a Vaesen book. So when I found out it was his art we're going to base it on, I was really happy because, I really love his work. So, and he has studied a lot of like the real folklore of Sweden. So I kind of had to do that as well when I wrote the game. I had to read up on the real old stories.
Yeah. Are there any particular favorites from that folklore that stood out to you when you're doing your research?
Well, there are many really funny when and really, I don't know what word it is in English, but kind of plump in Swedish, when it's like someone is not treating the trolls right, so they kind of make him fall through the toilet when he's sitting on him. It's like those kind of silly stories. And it's a fun thing because it's kind of the same stories all over Sweden. It just transforms when you go through the country in different directions. So I think it possibly says something about kind of the people living in different parts of the country, and that I find that interesting.
Yeah, the book was seemed really interesting to me because I love the idea of I love folklore and hearing about it in different parts of the world. There's some themes that are the same, like globally, and there's some things that are very different based on kind of where they come from. So I love the inspiration kind of source for this. So what was the pitch that Free League gave you when you started writing the game? How did they describe it and sell it to you?
Well, they wanted it to be like a mystery game, of course, and kind of a light touch horror, not cult, the Swedish really extreme horror game. And it was supposed to be a Monster of the Week game.
Yeah. I thought I had a copy of Cult here, so I was just going to grab it, but I don't. It's not on my file there. Yeah, I've got mine somewhere. I thought I had it. I have a pile of books here, and I was like, oh, but not that level.
No.
So, yeah. So what sort of level of horror would this game kind of be if you were trying to describe the theme to somebody so they could understand if it was a good game for them?
That's a tricky question, because I've actually had people saying that like some parts of the scenario in the book is too much horror, or too horrible, you could say. So I would say when I play it and when I write for it, I think of it as an adult game with adult themes, but I think you should, so it's kind of in the middle between, like, we're having a nice time and it's cozy and they're like, it's kind of fun and it's horrible. That's not a really good answer to it.
No. So is it sort of like with with folklore, how you have people talk about the Fae sometimes, and even though it seems like, oh, they're very nice, actually it's kind of a little bit creepy and sinister. So you can kind of take the story where you want to. Is it a little bit flexible in
You
that
could
way?
say it's not the Chainsaw Massacre. There are no. I don't think people should have like you shouldn't butcher people. There shouldn't be any kind of sexual violence. There shouldn't be like really sinister bad things happening. But it could still be themes that are really horrible. I mean, there are a lot of poverty in this game. I mean, you travel to meet people who are living really bad lives, kind of, and I think the actual horrors, the monsters should be they should be not the mood is important. They should be the mood, the setting of something strange, something other, something complicated. But they're not necessarily like collecting children's skulls or something. It's not. That is not what they do. They do something for a reason, and in that it could be horrible. But there are no like there are no meaningless horrible magicians who are just evil. There are no Sauron in this game. So like that. Yeah.
Okay. So how in terms of the game, so what character will you be playing in the game? So somebody's phrased it as, what kind of stories do you play in the game? So who will you be playing? What sort of adventures are you going on in this game?
You're actually a kind of normal person, except from one thing. You have the vision. You can see the Vaesen, the monsters. To all other people, they are invincible when they want to. Not invincible, invisible when they want to be. But you can actually see them, so you can hunt them and you can find them and you can solve problems where they are involved. And the game kind of starts up with the characters meeting and reopening an old society that has been like hunting these Vaesen for a long time, and it has ended, and now you're reopening the old base and starting it all over. And you kind of get missions or quests or mysteries to this base that's in the city, and then you always travel out into the kind of wildlife, to small villages and desolate places. And then there is something bad happening and you kind of have to solve it. And sometimes you need to kind of chase away the Vaesen, and sometimes it's the villagers who are the bad guys. And I should say one thing that is important. It's a game where you can seldom fight the Vaesen. They seldom are even hurt by physical violence. So that's seldom a way to do it. You need to kind of find the correct ritual to abolish this creature and make this demon go away, or kind of haggle with the trolls and make them be okay with the situation. So,
that's interesting. So it's not like necessarily a fighty combat one where you're running around trying to kill these creatures. That's interesting. No. So the characters are people that have a calling to kind of do, to do this, and that can see the Vaesen. They have this ability. When you're creating your character, how does I assume you have some kind of pre-made ones people can use, but if people want to make their own character, what does character creation look like in the game?
Well, as you said, you have these like archetypes you can choose from, like the doctor, the officer, the priest, the hunter, and then you make kind of choices. What trauma made you get the vision? Because something happened that made you have the vision, and what are your relationships to the others, and what is your dark secret, and so forth. So you kind of build it from that. There is also a system where you can just simply roll on some tables, life event tables, and just build your characters from different events in your life. So you have those two systems to build your character.
Excellent. And as I should have mentioned before, actually, so we use the system, the Year Zero engine, which a lot of Free League games use. So we were talking about the Blade Runner RPG a few weeks back. So that's kind of a similar system there, and also Tales from the Loop and Alien. So if you've played those, you'll be kind of familiar with the kind of system we're talking about here. But Nils, for people that haven't played those games and aren't familiar with the Year Zero engine, could you talk us through what the system's like and how the gameplay is mechanically?
Yeah. You can say all Year Zero games, most of them have like a D6 as the base. You have like a pool of dice, which you roll in sixes or successes. And you have, in most games, you have 12 skills you do in this game, and you have 4 attributes, and you kind of add them together to see how many dice you need to roll for doing something, like fighting or trying to manipulate someone or something. And if you don't get the successes you need, you can always push your roll. I think the same mechanics is in the latest Call of Cthulhu. You push the roll, and that means you do something that lets you try again. You failed to manipulate, and now you kind of say something else, or you get another chance to attack, and then you can re-roll the dice. But it also costs you. You get like a condition. You get angry, or you get scared, or hurt, or something. So it kind of costs you. You take damage doing that. So it's always sorry.
No, I was saying that seems really nice with the theme as well, because maybe if you're doing some ritual or something, you need to push past to make it work, but maybe that costs you something for, I don't know, something going on spiritually or with your character or something. But yeah.
I think the thought is that there's always the choice: should I press on and take the cost of doing that, or should we just return back to our hotel or whatever and try to kind of regain our strength and so forth.
So when is the setting? So where is the game set, and kind of the time frame of when it's set?
Yeah, it's set in a fantasy, not a fantasy version of the Nordic countries, but kind of a mythic version of the Nordic countries, like Sweden, Norway, Finland. But it's not actually the correct historical
heavily inspired
version.
by it.
Heavily inspired. Yeah, that's good.
Yes.
And it's set in the 19th century sometime, and that is also something. Some of the images I think have like clothes from the early 19th century, and some things are from like the late 19th century. And so it's kind of a mix. It's not meant to be an exact year. But I would like to say I think many people have played this game in the place where they live, and I think that is a great way of doing it. Like play it in Poland if you live in Poland and so forth.
I noticed you've also had recently the Kickstarter at the end of last year where you had a Mythic Britain and Ireland setting book. So if you are in Britain and you want to kind of set it there, or in Ireland, you can use that book to kind of, and that has kind of the stories and folklore from that part of the world as well.
And it has a different tone, I think, which was really nice to see. Yeah, I think I don't know if Graham choose the kind of more evil creatures, but I think many of the Vaesen he has written about are really more sinister, a little more harsher, maybe. I don't know if that is like the British tone or something. That the folklore.
Well, the British ones are harsher.
Yeah, I think so. I think the Swedish ones are more like, they're like the vettier, who
they're
are
a bit more
nice.
cheeky or something.
Yeah, I think so. And
yeah. I think British folklore is a lot about that. It was lots of telling the Irish as well. Irish folklore. There's lots of very kind of sinister sort of fae, and you don't mess with them. And you have to have a good respect for them. They were all sort of stories you'd tell children to make them behave. So they were always sort of a punishment sort of thing. So it makes sense that they're a little bit more creepy and dark. Yeah. That sounds quite nice. So talking about some of the creatures in the book, like we've got a really great artwork on the screen now, and people have said that the artwork looks, beautiful. What is? Can you tell us about the creature we're seeing here?
that's a creature who lives connected to the tree. It's like a creature whose soul rests in the tree.
Oh, okay.
I'm just gonna go look up the the English
Oh, sorry.
word.
I
One
just love that
second.
artwork, so it
Yeah,
looks
here it
very
is.
cool.
Ash tree wife. Yeah, so she's connected to like the woods and the tree, and that this is a creature that, I mean, she's not evil in
No.
her core, but there will be one of the main themes of the game is like civilization and industrialization kind of steamrolls over the old ways of living, and in that process the Vaesen, who are very much connected to kind of the old ways of living, are enraged or chased away or something. So I can imagine she would be like drawn into conflicts when
Yeah.
the old forests are cut down or something.
Yeah, definitely. So I can imagine that. I think it's interesting, like you say, they're not like bad guy kind of monsters, necessarily. It's a little bit more complicated than that. So like you say, I can imagine this sort of character, if the forest being cut down, like you say, is defending the woodland, and maybe the locals are like, oh, this evil thing is attacking us, when really maybe if you just leave the forest alone, it'll be fine. So I like that sort of concept. So what sort of so with the first book, just flicking through all these gorgeous pictures, the first book here, do you get some kind of scenarios and stories kind of written in there, adventures for you to go through?
There's one scenario,
Mm-hmm.
the Dance of Dreams,
Yeah,
which is it's about
gets me started.
yeah.
And then the Wicked Secret, which is this other book I've got on the stream here, has kind of other mysteries and stories written in there as well for you in the same setting.
Yeah.
So more stories and things there. What sort of, is there anything you can tell us with the stories here that could give us a bit more information about it without obviously giving it
I mean
away?
the stories in the Wicked Secret?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's I think there's one scenario, the Silver Sea, I think it is. It's about like the west coast of Sweden, and like the fishermen there have been trolled by something from the ocean. So you go out there on the islands and kind of make things right. But yeah, I think that is one of the scenarios where the Vaesen, it's not that evil. It's other things happening. So I
Yeah.
think it's Thomas from Free League who's written it, and it's from his
Okay.
home parts, where he has his
Okay.
roots. So that's cool. And then it's one. I'm gonna find what that is. Could you Can you read what they are called in English? I think I only have it in Swedish.
Oh, which one?
Yeah, it's just there's one.
A Wicked Secret one.
Yeah, there's one, this song about from a fallen star or something. It could be called in English, which is a really kind of low action scenario about kind of fairies and music and really nice tone into it, and it kind of doesn't explode into a battle at the end, but it's kind of really nice thematically, and it's a really good scenario, I think. And then you have one scenario I have written, which is about an old we call it bathing hotel in southern Sweden, very close to where I grew up, which was kind of it was the place of sin in that times. They had the people going there from all all over, because the men and women were allowed to bathe at the same shore, at the same you call it
That's
beach.
scandalous.
Yeah, scandalous, definitely. So they went there from Germany and Denmark. There were even a train going there like regularly. So that was a kind of a big conflict in that place. So I tried to write a mystery about that. So it's of course related to that basic conflict among the people there, and then the Vaesen is drawn into it.
Wow. What how long would these kind of scenarios be? Would it be like will it take you a session to kind of do that, or is it designed to be across multiple? Or
I think 2 sessions. All of them are about
Mhm.
2 sessions long, I would say.
Okay, great. And in playtesting, because obviously when you tried it out, did you have any players do something kind of unsurprising with the scenario, or do something you didn't expect?
Yeah, my players always do that.
Yeah, I think every GM ever is saying, yeah, that's what all the players do. They never do
Yeah,
the thing you
yeah.
expect. That's what role playing is.
I think in
Yeah.
this game they became very heavily engaged in to the kind of local people living there and try to kind of solve all their little petty conflicts. And I just had to kind of improvise and improvise more and more
So much.
NPCs and conflicts. And
What's this
yeah,
person's name then? John, I guess.
just
I
gonna
don't.
look in the book.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but that was it was really fun as well. So.
Hmm. How long did you spend kind of writing and testing the game and pulling it together? How long was that sort of process?
There were different processes. I wrote the
Hmm.
first. I kind of wrote the whole game in like maybe 8 months or
Oh wow.
something, but
Hmm.
that's kind of far from the end product.
Of
Then
course,
kind
yeah.
of the free league read it, and
Hmm.
I changed some, and then some time went, and they read it again, and I changed some again, and then kind of went back and forth, and then I think we did some changes just during the Kickstarter, and yeah,
Hmm.
so. And even after the Kickstarter, I think we changed
Hmm.
some systems and so. So it's of course several years,
Yeah.
but I didn't work with it for several years. But
The overall process. And what was your favorite part of working on the game? So what was your favorite moments of working with Vaesen and going into this world?
yeah, there are many.
Well, you
Uh,
can answer many. I won't make you pick just one if you have several on
yeah,
your mind.
I wasn't that. I was kind of interested in folklore before, but
Mhm.
I didn't really understand how much this connected to my kind of my own heritage, my own,
Mhm.
not perhaps my parents, but I mean my parents' parents and their parents, and going
Mhm.
back, and how rooted everything is in where you live and where you come from. And so I thought that was a nice thing to uh, find out, kind of.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Sorry, you will say.
No, yeah, I can definitely see that. Like I said, that's always what I love about folklore is when you go to different parts of the world and learn about it. So that's I can see that definitely being like a huge selling point. In terms of like writing the game, were there any kind of really challenging moments or something that was like, kind of difficult or took a while to kind of master and get correct?
Uh, there were some mechanics I think that were kind of hard to do right.
Hmm.
Um, I think the rules for magic, the
Hmm.
Vasen's magic. I still don't know if I've kind of explained it correctly.
Okay.
I know how it is supposed to work and how I use it when I play, but
Hmm.
I hope people use it. And
Okay.
I have this thought that there would be kind of 3 different types of magic.
Okay.
One which
Hmm.
will give the scenarios like mood. They would be just like things happening that is not really dangerous, but
Hmm.
this summer day and suddenly there's mist going in, you can't see anything because the Vaesen has kind of put a spell on the
Hmm.
location. And one
Okay.
kind of type of magic which is more like attack things, and it can
Hmm.
like burn things and do damage. And then there's the fairy magic, which is like change time and make you 50 years older or small as a yeah, teacup or something. So I had these ideas about that they should be magic that kind of address the scenario in different
Hmm.
ways, but I'm still not really sure if that's landed well, if I explained it good enough, kind of. So that
Well,
that was hard.
that was the challenging piece, yeah, magic.
Yeah.
How mechanically does kind of magic work and present in the game? We've had someone watching ask as well. They're curious how that works in kind of the scenario, because I think you gave us a really good overview of kind of the feel and the vibe of the magic there, but mechanically when we're playing the game, what does that look like in the game?
Yeah, and that's another thing that is one of the thing is this is not a game where you kind of have magic points for the creature and just count them down, and the creature can only do this amount of magic, because you're not really supposed to play against the players. It's more like you're co-writing a scenario or a
Yes.
story.
Yeah.
So if you address it as a competition, the magic system does not work, I think.
Be too powerful.
Yeah, and it's not written for that. It would just not be fun.
Yeah.
But with that said, you can say that like the first kind of magic enchantments, you can the creature can just do it, and often it's like written into the scenario like a countdown. The first step is that rats invade the hotel or something, and then you, oh shit, there's not something happening, some creature is here. I mean, if you played it as a competition, you can have rats invade all the time. There's no like limitation, but that is not the point of that kind of magic. And then you have curses, which are like attacks, and that is an opposed roll, kind of how much damage, how crazy can the creature make you? Can it, are you do you become mute or not? Can you resist it? And that is the same for the trollcraft. That is like changing the rules of science, you could say, teleporting you or making your thoughts, thought virus invade your thoughts. Or just, so it's supposed to kind of give good role-playing moments when you shrink and kind of, So, but that's just a post-roll as well.
Okay, that makes sense. So it sounds like I think the style of GMing you were talking about there is one I like generally, where the GM it's not a fight against the players. They're also part of telling the story and facilitating the story. What advice would you give to GMs that are going to be running a game of Vaesen for the first time?
I would invite the players a lot to describe things, how things look, what they feel, and kind of let them join in on the co-writing of a story, and just kind of take it slow and let them investigate the village where they go to, and just give them room. And then just hit them with magic and conflicts that they can react to and do stuff with.
Okay, and because this game is like it is an investigation, like you say, people say, oh, weird things are happening, and you turn up and you discover this weird magic is happening, and you have to try and uncover what's going on. Sometimes people have said when they have an investigation kind of story, sometimes their players kind of get lost and aren't getting it. So what kind of advice would you have for GMs, or what does the system do to try and help players that are perhaps a bit lost with finding the solution?
And the system encourages you to kind of have several links to important clues, so you can kind of find what you need from different places. There's always also kind of countdown what happens step by step if you do nothing. So at the end, if you don't find what you need to find, or if you don't solve it, most often something catastrophic happens.
Oh no.
And that will that will be the end of the scenario. So I don't think you need to solve every mystery. You can also like return with a failure in your backpack back home to the base. That is not a bad Vaesen scenario.
It's a story, isn't it? So I guess I tend
to give clues to my players when they are don't know what to do. I kind of so I kind of help them, but I mean, you don't need to get to the pre-written end of the scenario. It will end anyway in some way.
It will happen regardless of what the players do. The story will carry on. Okay, great. We've talked a little bit about in the base. So you're saying you're playing a character who can see the Vaesen, so you have that ability, and you're kind of setting up this. You're going back to this old base that's kind of being rebuilt or remade. Could you talk about the base a little bit and the significance that has in the game and the story?
Yeah, it's an old castle.
Cool.
I wanted to have it be a real castle in Uppsala, the town just close to Stockholm in Sweden. But for some reason we moved it, so I had to invent a fake castle. I think the first one was too far from the city center, and we wanted it to be like in the city center because the tale is about going from the urban environment into the rural environment. But this is like an old castle where we filled it with kind of mysteries and strange things that the old society left behind. So they could be like Vaesen they have imprisoned in the cellar, or they have like ritual rooms you could find, and we could build up this old mystical room and so forth. So you can invest between the mysteries. You can invest in your base and build it, and build things that will help you solve the mysteries. And you can employ servants and stuff.
So that's your place. So like in a campaign, that'll be the place you always go back to and are kind of building from. So, and all these different events as you have with things, you'll go out and come back to and things.
Yeah,
so
exactly. Yeah.
And
sorry.
No, you carry on. You carry on. I'll get to it later.
There's. I think things should happen in the base as well, in the headquarter. You can kind of, when you invest in things, problems may arise, like Vaesens kind of find out about you, or the local police get interested, or some journalists think perhaps you're doing some shenanigans. And
so in the world, like, do the police and people like that, they don't believe that the Vaesen are real, or is that?
No, they don't. I can't see them, and I mean they're city dwellers, so they don't believe
that
in
makes sense.
those things.
So a little bit, not quite the same vibe, but a little bit Buffy the Vampire Slayer in terms of there's real monsters and no one else knows about. Nothing else I think is necessarily hugely paralleled, but I guess you could play it that way if you wanted to.
Yeah, I love Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
But yeah, I was thinking it feels a little bit like, has anyone compared it to The Witcher as well? Because it feels a little bit like that. So, but yeah, because
Which is a little bit more grim, perhaps. I think, but it's like
similar to that. But I had a question before I was going to ask about which has gone out about my mind, kind of about doing a campaign. So if you're doing a campaign of this, which it sounds like it's ideal to do because you have these kind of scenarios you can do and come back to your base. I'm assuming the book has lots of different kind of creatures in. I assume you can make a scenario just yourself based off the lore from one of the creatures in the book. So what if we're learning about the creatures in the book, what does it look like? Like, do we have just like a stat block or history, or how does it look?
My aim was for it to be really easy to create a mystery or scenario from this book. You shouldn't really have to buy anything else, I think, than the rule book. You can, of course, but so I've tried to fill it with like stuff to build scenarios from. And we look like the mermaid. It's like a kind of short texts with like just describing the mermaid. And there's a quote from Carl von Linné, like the Swedish famous botanic. He worked with flowers and put out the system for how you define different you know what? He made some travelings in the northern Sweden during the 19th century. So I took his notebook, his diary, and I just took quotes from it and presented each creature with like some parts of his notes of his diary. So there's a little quote and there's a little description and there's a short stats block with like 1, 2, 3, 5 stats, some magical powers, and then there's the ritual, of course, how you defeat this creature.
Okay.
And then there are 3 examples of conflicts for each creature. And I think each of those conflicts, it could be built into a scenario. You could kind of create a scenario from that.
Yeah.
And then there's a whole chapter about just how you create mysteries step by step.
Oh, okay. So the book kind of guides you through that process as well.
Yeah.
That's great. I was about to say, I think just because looking at this book, like when you have just the creatures, there's enough inspiration, because as soon as you hear about them, you can imagine so many scenarios for how that can go wrong in the world. So that sounds great. Thank you for answering that question. Someone has said that the game sounds very intriguing to them. Glad to hear. So they're saying, where would you say it lies between a mechanical and narrative game?
I would say it's more a narrative game, I would say, but it's not a free form game. It's not a it follows the traditional roles of game master and player and how a scenario is structured and sessions and dice, and so it's kind of traditional, but definitely more narrative. It's not a game.
Yeah, not loads of dice, not loads of sitting there working out maths on a table and
No.
then yeah.
And it's no point mini-maxing in this game. It's not about that.
Yeah, definitely. So it seems more about kind of the story and the world and that interesting kind of is conflict the right term to use when you're talking about, the urbanization of the land compared to the natural world? So because it seems like it's just constantly, because that's where most of the mysteries will come in, I imagine, is just those two worlds kind of butting heads, and the chaos that comes from as a result. That's great. We've had some great questions in the chat. If you're watching, we are coming up to near the end of the session. So if you have any questions, please do pop them in the chat and we'll happily answer them. So as we've said, the books you can purchase on Free League site, which is Free League Publishing EN store, which is for the English store, I assume. And I'll put the link in the chat there so you can grab it to have a look there. And the books we have at the moment is we have the core rule book here. So the core rule book there will have everything you kind of need, and that's what we're chatting about. That has the information about how to set up your scenarios, and as well as all this gorgeous art in there. There's also a Wicked Secret, which has I think that's 4 more mysteries in the book. 4, 5. A good amount of mysteries in there to get you going if you want something kind of pre-written to get you started. And also there was the Kickstarter campaign that went out late last year for Mythic Britain and Ireland, which apparently is a little bit more creepy because that's what the British are like, I guess. A bit darker and more creepy. So that's kind of Vaesen, I guess. So would you say, is there anything mechanically in the system we haven't, or in the story, important points that we haven't kind of talked about in the game? Or have we covered everything?
I think we have covered everything.
Okay, my other question would be, so what would be some of your favorite kind of creatures in it? You mentioned the one that is a bit cheeky and makes you like fall down the toilet or something, did you say? But what would be some of your, is that what you said at the beginning?
Sounds really creepy.
Yeah, but like in a silly way, not in like a
but there are silly stories as well in those Swedish folklore, definitely. And then there are really creepy, horrible ones just intermixed. You just kind of read one story and say, oh, and then the next, okay, not that fun. So it's a strange mix. I like the neck. Is one of my favorites. The one who's sitting playing the violin in the water and just kind of trying to lure people to him. And he kind of he dreams of finding a way to heaven and finding connection with humans, but all he ever does is drowning people. So he's kind of doomed to never reach heaven and never get a connection with anyone.
Okay.
And
So
when he plays, no one can stop dancing. So it's kind of it's a devil in another disguise, kind of, but a more sad version, I think.
yeah, because he's doing it with the motivation of trying to find connection, but ultimately that doesn't work
work that
out.
well. No.
Oh, all right. It's not related to this horse in the water there. No, that's not in there.
That's
Yeah.
another one. Yeah, that's
Oh, yeah.
also Drowner, actually, but that's a more sinister one. It just
Oh, okay.
lets people, children, climb up on it, and then it kind of runs down into the lake and drowns them. So that's not.
Okay.
It's just plain evil.
It does look pretty sinister if you look at it.
Yeah.
Like if I saw it in the middle of the lake, I wouldn't be like, "Oh, let's go for a pony ride." It looks like
No,
it's
me
mad.
neither.
Like its eyes are like glowing. It doesn't look friendly.
No.
Okay, that's great. Well, so we've talked a lot about Vaesen, so thank you so much for kind of sharing that story with us. Like I say, if that's of interest to you, please go to Free League Publishing, to their store. The link is in the chat and it's also up on the screen now, which is freeleaguepublishing.com/en/store, and you can pick up the books there, because the best way to support indie tabletop RPG creators is to buy their stuff. But I'm going to get us to talk about some other kind of tabletop RPGs now as well. So Nils, what would you say are some of your favorite RPGs, things you'd recommend to people that aren't Vaesen and are not Dungeons and Dragons?
First, I'm thinking of Apocalypse World, but I guess everyone has played that now. You know, everyone has
maybe
played it.
not.
Okay, then this is the game I've played the most during the recent years. It's like it's an apocalypse world. We kind of play a badass, cool character who can do really. You can change the world a lot, but at the same time, the world is really just collapsing around you with major problems all the time. And the mechanical system has been used in so many games. I can't imagine any other game being reused mechanically that much as Apocalypse World has been.
Yeah. Well, they have a lot of games you'll see on Kickstarter of people watching that say powered by the apocalypse. So that's this system. And it's because they have like an open game license, so people can use it to produce them and publish their own games using the system. So I think it's very accessible and works very well with lots of other games and systems. What sort of settings?
I would recommend just playing the original.
Oh, okay,
do
really?
it as well. Yeah, I think it's definitely the best version. Yeah.
Okay, and have you played lots of other versions of it, but this is the one you come back to? Interesting. Yeah. I've never played the original version. I've played the system using like different games and things, but I've not played the original. So maybe that's something I need to have a look into.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you for your recommendation on that there. So we're coming up to the end of the session now. I think we've answered most of the questions here. If you have any more questions that we haven't gone through, please do let us know in the chat now so we can quickly answer it for you. But we will be back on Not D&D next week. So next week on Monday at 10 p.m, we're talking to Possum Creek Games about their game Wander Home. So we'll be having them here. So come and watch it live to ask your questions there, and it'll also be on the podcast here. But if you can't wait a whole week, tomorrow on Tuesday, it is the final episode of the Star-Crossed Seaway, and that's at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for the Level Up Advanced 5th edition. So that is the finale of that show. So you can go check that out, and you can watch it wherever you are watching here. Or if you are listening on a podcast, you can go to enrpg.podbean.com and have a look there. So the guests, Nils, are saying thank you very much for your interesting, sharing your game with us there. So thank you very much. And I would like to say thank you very much for your time and coming on to chat to us.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. All right. And thank you for everyone that's watched. That's all from us this week. Bye.